Hello. That we have all technical issues solved. In this forum, it's very important. So welcome to the session AI for Patients, from healthbots to voice-driven interfaces. My name is Sarah Becker. I'm from the University of Witten-Herdecke, the Institute for Digital Transformation in Healthcare, and I will be moderating the session. We will have 4 very smart and very diverse speakers here, and I will introduce them a bit later. Let's just jump into the topic. Can you hear me well? Okay. So, AI is everywhere. Algorithms are everywhere in society. We are used to it in advertising, social media, jurisdiction, decision-making, and so on. Nowadays, we know that it has a vast potential in healthcare too. So from early, you can see here, there are a lot of fields where we say AI might have a potential for the healthcare sector and offer benefits to patients, doctors, and each one of us. Let's take a step back. What do these potentials imply for healthcare? In general, we say the AI has the potential to change the existing paradigms of healthcare. What are the paradigms of healthcare today? Today, we treat diseases when they become prevalent. Patients are getting in touch with a doctor when they suffer from severe symptoms. Now, in a data-driven world, data-driven technologies, patients get empowered by data. Do they already get empowered by data in the healthcare scene? We might see this later. But definitely in practically every aspect of life, we are now used to convenience, that we experience seamless processes, our lives get easier in general. All of this happens due to technologies that we, in some areas, do not really recognize that they are there, but they just make it easy. So how do these fall into place in healthcare too? How can we leverage this potential? So we face the paradigm shift from sick care, where we talk about patients, to healthcare. We were no longer having patients, but every one of us, which is just a consumer. And the so said to be technologies are probably the drivers, the enablers. So we would, face a shift from solely curing disease to proactively protecting health. But every one of you who is active in the actual healthcare systems know that this is not the case today, but we are feeling that this paradigm shift behind the scenes is happening. One more thing and then I'm done and hand over to the panelists. The German healthcare system is historically a closed system. There are only 3 parties in the systems that are involved, which you can see here: the patient, the payers, and the providers. This is the reason why the healthcare system is highly inefficient in economic terms. And behind this inefficiencies, there are the so-called information asymmetries. Let me make a quick example, and then you all know where they come from. The patient is paying the insurance contributions, they're paying their insurance contributions to the payer. It's not based on the health status or based on getting treatment, but it's based on their economic income. So this is between the patient and the payer. Then when the patient gets sick, he consults a doctor, a hospital or a physician, and this doctor provides medical treatment to him. Afterwards, the provider, the doctor or the hospital receives reimbursement from the payer. So actually, in this process, not everybody's talking to everyone, but just the 2 parties involved. Now we see that because of digitalization, and new players entering the market, on all three dimensions, we have the chance to really attack those information asymmetries. Why do I say attack? Why do I use this word? Because I think this is where the potential really is. That this closed system opens up, and all the potential that we see in generating data that is today still in closed silos at each of the players. If we leverage this data, if we share this data, then we can create value through this data. If we can create value through this data, we will all come to what we saw before, a health protecting society where we no longer focus on sickness, but on staying healthy. So the traditional healthcare system is disrupted already, or is maybe, by new players. And I'm so glad that we have some of these new players with us today. First, we will hear from Oskar Kiewig. He's MD, CEO and lead designer at CardioCube, which is a voice-driven solution for cardiac patients, and he will tell us more about his solution and his vision. Then we will hear from Hanal Kaheya. She's also a medical doctor, the founder of Smart Health, Yugi, and the creator of Super Easy, a chatbot on Facebook Messenger, how her solution works and how she's gonna revolutionize healthcare. From Glenn Bilby, he's the founding CEO of Kinematic, a visual system for recognizing movement dysfunctions. And I think from him we will see in movement how he's going to make change. And last but not least, we want to shed light on the implications on AI in healthcare for our whole society. And I'm so glad that today Professor Christian Dirks is joining us, because he is really active in different fields. He's a specialist lawyer for social and medical law. He's a general practitioner, and he's the founder of his own law firm and the Helix Hub Berlin. So he will really give us an overview on how this all ties together for the German system. So please, Oskar, the stage is yours.
Just click, right?
They do it for you. They do it for you.
Yes.
It's all automatic.
All optimized.
No humans needed.
Okay. Something is still loading on my screen, so I'll just wait for a while. Working already? Okay. Great. Yes. Thank you for your kind introduction, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here. As Sarah said, I'm an MD, a very young physician that turned entrepreneur. But from the very first years, I've been mainly interested in cardiology. And I started at some point during my med school to ask a question like, how does the future doctor look like? What should she do in order to impact the new healthcare? And the question is he going to look like this? I mean, for sure, one thing we can learn from Dr. Steve is is being passionate about building great products with great precision. And that's actually my main thesis for today, that we really do need doctors to be active part of building digital healthcare space products. And I would like to back up this thesis by showing a use case that we've been building for the last 2 years, software called CardioCube. You see, it all started when we've seen, of course, a huge problem that you're aware of, that heart disease is 1 in every 4 deaths. And that, when you have a patient going home, for instance, he's having congestive heart failure, then, 30% of those patients are getting back and back again, the same type of patients, to the hospital for unplanned readmissions. And of course, costs of those unplanned readmissions are really, really huge. And the same of nobody likes to go to the hospital, right? Even me as an MD, I'm a terrible hypochondriac. I don't like a hospital from the patient side. And a lot of startups, started to disrupt the space with smart bands like Fitbit, like other health watches, but it still doesn't give you the right sense of the meaning of the data. And everything starts with patient experience. That's why we started to at first create our own device and then transfer to voice-first devices, to speakers you should know from the market that are used right now, mostly for fun, like Amazon Echo or Google Home. And we built a platform working on those devices so that patient is having a continuous daily follow-up, like sessions, around 10 to 15 minutes per day, and so that all of his content and symptoms from the context of his speech are analyzed and then uploaded to the EMR, medical record system. And those conversations are tailored, of course, per patient in order to then predict complications and alert the physician, like before a worsening of his state would happen. And we went because you can have great technology, but you need to find a place where it could be really applicable in the real life. That's the hard part. That's why mainly we started right now with US and with doctors' offices and hospitals, then planning to scale to insurance company and doing a typical B2C. And we are right now working with Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, California, West Hollywood, and that's the first place that adopted our solution already for patient automated check-in. And I'm really happy to say that we constantly improving the system, and this week we reached a 97% accuracy rate. What means that we took into account what the patient said, what was analyzed, and what finally was interpreted by the system in an automatic way inside of the EHR. We're also helping startups working with Bezos Expeditions, Alexa, and Google Assistant, and that's how our skill recently has been rated, like more than 1% still, an average skill. We're also getting this month an FDA Class 1, that is a medical device as a software, and I'm happy to tell you more during the panel. Thank you.
Good day, everybody. My name is Hajna Kaheya, and I am the founder and creator of Super Easy AI, which is a female health chatbot running currently on Messenger. Oscar started from the perspective of a voice-first interface, focusing on patients' needs. In our case, we are solely text-based. And the reason for that is that the problem that we are solving is rather a taboo. When menstrual health issues, infertility, or sexually transmitted infections affect us, we still feel ashamed and stigmatized. This means that only 25% of women in the UK go to cancer screening because they still think that talking about HPV or cancer is a taboo topic. This means that the prevalence of STIs is growing both in Europe and in the US. Also, 42% of women have been blamed because they are bleeding, because of menstruation itself. And this results in medical practice non-communicable diseases. People do not talk about it. I faced this problem when I was a medical student. I've been doing sort of enlightenment lessons in grammar schools and elementary schools. I've talked to thousands of students and teachers because we thought that, yes, the best way to educate people about reproductive health would be, face-to-face conversations. But we realized that this is something that you cannot just scale it up. You can give solutions and answers in a personal conversation as humans only to maybe a few hundreds or thousands of people during your lifetime. But when you're using technologies, you can scale this up to millions and billions of people. And this is what we are doing with Super Easy AI. She is a virtual friend. You can just message her from your Facebook Messenger. She's completely automated, and she has a little bit of AI at the back end. She is automated, curated, and always accessible, and most importantly, she's always free of judgment. This results that our users, mostly young women from the US and the UK, feel free to share a lot about their personal lives, about reproductive health issues with us. And what we try to do is, on one hand, give them personalized recommendations about health choices, and on the other hand, to educate them about reproductive health. This means just simple advice on menstruation, tracking their period, giving advice and simply sharing knowledge on contraceptives, both long-acting and short-acting, and also a few gynecological diseases like endometriosis. Our vision is to empower people to have open conversations about their bodies, and we start with reproductive health. Thank you very much.
Oh, very good. Do I need to do anything?
No. You have just one slide.
Just wait? Yeah, one slide. Okay, so how many people have a grandmother or a grandfather here? Put your hand up. Nice. So the bad news is 30% of them will fall sometime this year. Even worse, 40% of those will die. Just in case you didn't know. This is a big problem. Why do they fall? Because they lose their balance. Is it something that can be prevented? Absolutely. How many of you have back pain? If you dare to admit it, put your hand up. Wow. Okay, now that's 80% of the population have back pain and 60% have it every single year, over and over again. The worst time of the year is at Christmas time, when you bend down to pick up a little packet that's about this big with a cuddly toy in it, and you can't stand up again. It's got nothing to do with heavy lifting. It's a condition that's to do with poor movement patterns. 1 in 5 workplaces report having people with back pain or neck pain. When we've been scanning corporates and we ask the population, how many of you work in discomfort and it affects your productivity, the answer is 80%. Movement disorders affect 1/3 of the population. People with musculoskeletal problems, that's 52% of the population. People who have arthritic conditions, that's 16% of most GP visits. How many of you have been to the doctor and had a digital assessment of your movement patterns? None of you. Anybody here with an elite sporting background? Nobody's been a gold medalist or a Premier League footballer. Right, that's the area I come from, sports medicine. Everybody gets measured for their movement patterns, because we know if we can prevent them getting injured and they're on a salary of 2 million euros a year, we can save everyone a lot of money. More importantly, we can keep them on the field kicking goals and winning gold medals. Why don't we do that for the rest of us? Because the technology's been too expensive. And processing that data takes about 3 hours. And there's not a physio or a doctor in the world that has 3 hours to look at your data. They have somewhere between 5 minutes and 20 minutes to see you. The beautiful thing with machine learning, AI, augmented intelligence, whatever you want to call it, is that the computer can do all of these mundane calculating tasks on behalf of the doctor, on behalf of the physio, on behalf of the ergonomist, and tell you, inform you about what your patient needs. The interesting thing is there are not that many medical practitioners that are super interested in doing this. They want to make the decisions themselves. They want to be the expert. So the power is shifting towards the individual. The power is shifting to the employer. The HR manager is now saying, I want my employees to be more productive. I want them to have less injuries. And the insurance companies who pick up the bills for lots of this are saying, we're happy to fund it. So this paradigm shift from clinical people making decisions to machines and robots making decisions is very, very real. And it's not just the AI connecting to the provider, it's the AI now connecting to the payer. It could be an insurer, it could be the public system, or it could be the employer directly. And it's a very, very interesting time. So what do we do? Right now we're working on an AI project where we analyze the way people move. When you bend sideways to pick up a bag at the Dusseldorf airport, you move in a certain way. And if you're good enough to analyze that movement, we can tell you whether or not you have risk for back pain. We can tell you whether you have existing back pain. And if we catch it early enough, looking at the trajectory of your body parts, just like the trajectories of aeroplanes in the sky, we can predict if there's going to be an accident. Wouldn't it be nice to know 10 years before you have arthritis that you're going to get arthritis, and that you can do something about it without pain today instead of horrible pain in 10 years' time, without drugs, without frequent visits, without having to tell your doctor the same thing every time you go to visit them, or 5 different doctors the same story because you have to meet a GP and then a specialist and then a surgeon and then a physiotherapist, and you have to repeat your medical journal every time. More importantly, wouldn't it be better if you had a 3D video of the way you move, instead of some silly text description from somebody who thinks they saw the way you move and report it in text? Because quite frankly, in Sweden, where I come from, we have 30 years of medical data in a database, and it's all in text, and we can't do anything with it. But if we had 30 years of video of the way you move, we could explain why old people fall, we can explain why you get arthritis, we can explain why you get back pain, and we can monitor you over time and give you individualized, personalized feedback. So with the help of machine learning algorithms and with the help of lots and lots of data from around the world, this is what AI Move is trying to do. Thank you.
So, from a perspective of the legal framework and the societal demand, I shall give us an idea of what this means. And I think it's an extremely exciting time. Never before have so many excellent ideas met capital and have turned the healthcare environment into something that is very vivid, very lively, and developing new ideas and new services and new products every week. So we're really privileged that we can participate in such a shift, such a dramatic shift. Now, as this workshop is focusing on the patient, I would like to give you an idea of what I think what the patient's role will be in the healthcare system, looking at the framework of data processing and the involvement of AI. Never before has data been so quick, so much, and so complicated. We call this the phenomenon of the 3V of velocity, variety, and volume. And therefore, we need very intricate technologies to manage those data. Whereas in the old days, the physician just collected a file from a couple people. He had all the data available concerning a patient. Nowadays, it's just billions of bits and bytes that need to be collected to establish a good platform for the basis of diagnosis and therapy. And therefore, we see that data play an entirely different new role in the therapy for the patients, as they are the most decisive criterion. So data being the most important element of the healthcare system, we need to find somebody who is responsible for those data. Now, the old-fashioned setting is that the general practitioner collects the data for the patient. But patients move. They go to a different city. They go to another physician. They change their insurance company. So if you look at the life cycle of a human, what is the only constant factor that will follow that patient over his life, over the full scale from 0 to 70, 80, hopefully 90 years? Who is that? It's the patient himself. He's the only one who really has access to all the data, who can be made in a position that he has that access. And he is the one who cares most too, because it's his data, and the physicians, the hospitals, everybody else will need the data. So my suggestion is let's empower the patient to be the most responsible person as a data processor, keeper, storer, and provider. Therefore, we need as actions. Actions is the patients need to be educated how to do that. We need courses, classes, seminars that tell patients about the importance of this and how to deal with it. We shall give them access. You have heard about Article 20 of GDPR that will entitle the patient to call for a collection of data in an interoperative format to create a sort of competition between the data providing platforms and to make data transferable. We need a secure infrastructure for that. So society must build and supply electronic patient files for supporting this means. And we also need a legal framework for artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence will create decisions, and it will no longer be the physician that will decide. The artificial intelligence will decide about diagnose and the therapy. And therefore we need a legal framework that creates liability where the action is. And that means AI must be held liable. It must have its own legal personality, and it must have an insurance, just like an incorporation. And this is the only way how we can actually challenge master the challenge of the data overflow in that field. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we all have the same opinion in one thing, that as the sessions are called, i.e. in patient, that the power in healthcare is generally shifting to the patient, and that it should even more shift to the patient. Of course, a lot of things need to be done to make this happen. And we have heard three different, how I would call them, vertical innovations in the healthcare, which each one of you three, one of them. And Professor Dirks, who gave us a view on how a horizontal innovation, how I would call it, could, should, and maybe will pull all of those vertical innovations together. So I would focus again on each of the verticals, and maybe again another statement from you. How do you, because you talk to patients every day, like practically you talk to them, you interact with them, you get feedback. So maybe a statement from each of you. How does the patient receive his role in today's healthcare system, in the interaction with you? Do the patients want to be in the driver's seat, Oscar?
Okay, yeah, it's working, all right. Yes, I mean, we had a real long journey with patients from the very first feedback loop of our product, like 3 years ago. And when it comes especially to voice solutions, I need to say that it changed a lot. Because you have normally, for instance, during the process of taking medical history, a medical assistant, nurse, or doctor taking the history, and now it's a black box. So it's totally different kind of psychological relationship. So the first thing we're doing was kind of feasibility testing of the acceptance of this solution. Because we, worried that, lack of this human factor on the other side could dramatically worsen the relationship. But fortunately for us, it was totally different. It was the opposite, because it turned out that patients sometimes feel more comfortable about sharing their health issues, also those intimate ones, or those, that may seem to be, I would say, a bit like on the line of the privacy with the machine, rather more than with a human being. And then a human being, once this data is reported, can actually dig into this problem during the visit itself. So like we've seen during our work, that one thing is kind of minimizing the rate of unplanned readmissions, and that is kind of our main target. But on the other hand, it also helps with all the plan visits, because once the patient comes, you already have all the data that has never been gathered before, and the physician is kind of like able to help the patient on a much higher quality, and that makes not only the patient more informed, but also I think like really central part of the whole process.
Hanalka, especially in your super easy chatbot, I feel that the aspect of privacy, of intimacy, of trust is even more prevalent than in the other two solutions. So maybe can you give us a little more insights into how patients talk to you about their fears maybe that they face in today's healthcare?
Yes, sure. So first of all, I think that our experience with CardioCube is really resonating, from the sense that one of our first hypotheses to test was really, do people talk to machines? In your case, it's a voice interface. In our case, it's a text interface. And honestly, even for myself, it was a really, really big question, and from a certain aspect, I was even afraid of the answers, because, what if it doesn't work at all? But the really huge surprise for me that I think it really works perfectly, or even better than with human beings. And we saw this from the very, very first results, from the very, very, very first conversations that we initiated with users, with women. We don't really identify them as patients at the moment, because you are going with a B2B approach, connecting them with doctors. We are rather having a consumer approach, and we're not moving into the B2B system or payer system at the moment. So the first trials were advertising like a virtual friend on Facebook Messenger who you can talk to without shame, who is just a friend for you. And we tested this even without having a product. I was on the other side, and we were just running a test for like €5 on Facebook, and in 3-4 hours we got like, I believe, 300 or 400 messages from individual users, and all of them wanted to try out Super Easy. They wanted to talk to a chatbot about their really private issues about reproductive health, and this was like a mesmerizing result. And as we didn't have a product at that time, I had to answer personally to these people that thank you for your interest, but we have to come back to you. And since what we have been seeing since is really, really similar. People or women do share some of their reproductive health issues. They do require information, advice, and sometimes even bring in topics that we are not necessarily equipped to talk about, because artificial intelligence still has very serious limitations in every case, and so it is, I think, probably with all of our products. We are improving them, but we need the users, the patients, to feed us with their opinions and with their data, of course, to be able to create better products. So I would say that the results in our case are really surprisingly good, and people are really willing to share and get advice, especially in topics that are not considered to be everyday topics.
So what you are raising is also the issue of trust, and for a very, very long time, I think the doctor-patient relationship still today is something where we claim that this is a trusted relationship, is somebody who takes care, helps you. Maybe Professor Dirks, how do you see this relationship, the patient-doctor relationship, changing in terms of this matter? So could AI do things better?
If AI really works, we'll have a third player on the stage. So far, the patient-physician relationship is characterized by a situation in which the physician is the learned person and the patient is somebody who is patient, that's where the word's derived from, and endures the physician's decision. And especially in chronic diseases, the advantage that the physician has concerning the more knowledge, that he has a lot more knowledge than the patient, still is tremendous. Now, if you look over there, you see rare diseases. The physicians have learned that rare diseases are especially one thing: they're rare. And this is why they don't diagnose for rare diseases, because that the chance that the patient will really have a rare disease is very rare indeed, because it's only 5 out of 100,000 that will have a rare disease. However, there is some million people, 3 to 5 million people with rare diseases in Germany alone, meaning that in the practice, in the course of one day, there is most likely one patient with a rare disease. And it will take up to 7 years until this rare disease is diagnosed. And therefore, it is of utmost importance that the artificial intelligence takes on this new responsibility of diagnosing rare diseases earlier. And this is what a lot of these software applications actually can do. And this will steer a development that we're already observing, that the patients with rare diseases have more knowledge about their disease than the physicians, because the physician might have heard about the rare disease, but the patient has read everything that is there about that disease. So that is reversing that relationship. And as artificial intelligence doesn't develop by itself, we need somebody who develops it, somebody who builds it. Gifted physicians, for example. And if it's strong artificial intelligence, we have a hard time, I don't know if it's impossible, but we have a hard time following what made the decision. With weak artificial intelligence, we can always check the algorithm, and maybe it was programmed okay, or it was not programmed okay, and then we find somebody who is responsible. But with deep learning, we have a product that has developed itself, and we cannot evaluate if it has decided wrong or correct only after we've seen that the results probably go wrong. So that brings about the necessity that physicians need to understand that they need a new development course, new education, medical learning 4.0, integrating all that knowledge. They need the proper qualification to deal with the patient and his data. And we need also the understanding of the physician that he has to take decisions together with the patient.
So who's then responsible for the lifelong journey through healthy and through sick times? Is it the patient alone? What could the doctor be the companion?
Well, I see that this is this might take a generation or so, and this will not take place everywhere at the same time. But as I said earlier, the patient is the only continuum in the whole history of his data, and so he definitely needs to be responsible. But as most patients can't do it right now, and some of them will never be able to manage that, we also need services. I said to my children, look, if you know by today what kind of job you will be working in 10 years, if you think you know that, then you'll probably be unemployed in 10 years. Because if you look around, a lot of the jobs that we have today have not been around for 10 years ago. So one of these jobs that I envision is a personal health data manager. Somebody who offers to manage that for a person. This is a service you can rent at different rates from different companies. And they actually, the better they are, and the better they represent the responsibility and the individual choice of a patient, the more consensus we will achieve and the more powerful decisions of the patients will be made possible.
Thank you. I think the personal manager is my keyword for you, Glenn. I think listening to you and what you say, how huge the cohort of people, like nearly every one of us, is for what you do and your product is. Listening to you, you're coming not from the medical side, you're coming from another industry, and when we're listening to you, we feel like, oh, it must be so easy. It makes so much sense what he's saying. So maybe one question to you. How do you experience the healthcare system in Germany? Maybe you can say something to that. Or where do you see resistances within the system?
Okay, that's a long discussion. I'd say the number one factor is reimbursement models. They're screwed up. and they don't serve the patient, they serve organizations. The other is ego within the medical profession. The other one is fear of doing wrong. Healthcare workers are not allowed to be wrong. They're wrong all the time, but they have some freedom to be wrong because nobody's really holding them accountable. There is no A/B testing of healthcare workers as there is on an app or something that technology is familiar with. Healthcare is not engineered like technology is engineered, and there's not that much space for experimentation officially. But I've been a clinician since 1987. I experiment with my patients all the time. I do some weird things to some weird Tottenham Hotspurs footballers in order to get them on the field, and it works. And I'm a hero amongst the team for doing something completely strange. But I couldn't officially go out and say that I followed the NICE guidelines from the UK Health Board, which said that this is the way I should treat this injury. So there are lots of systematic problems in healthcare that won't allow us to embrace technological innovation as quickly as technology is innovating. This is our biggest dilemma. Healthcare workers and people responsible for healthcare are evolving like this, and technology is evolving like this. And the gap is getting bigger and bigger, and the opportunity for misunderstanding and the opportunity for missing opportunities, it's the opportunity cost that we need to look at, is huge, and it's getting bigger. So I totally agree that health professionals, health institutions, and people who are responsible for procurement and reimbursement models, they all need to be educated about the possibilities that are coming out of Google-ish type organizations. And they're not exposed at all. As I said earlier, since 1987, I've been working with performance technology, force platforms, heart rate monitors. You're all wearing a heart rate monitor on your wrist now. You can buy one from MediaMarkt down the road for nothing. But back in my day, in 1987, it was even rare to have it with elite athletes. As things become cheaper, more understood by the market, the drivers of individuals with their own individual rights and their own sense of ownership of their own health is going to change things completely. And the risk is that healthcare and healthcare systems will be stuck in no man's land, not knowing what to do.
Well, what we see here is the transformation that we have maybe a healthcare system that's lagging behind, and we can somehow over there see that something tremendous is going to change, and the way to go there probably is going to be very, very, it's a lot of work to do. I just have one more question to come back to this vertical innovations that need to be integrated into a horizontal innovation so that we can all benefit from that. Right now we see that we have all the sectors in Germany. We have different sectors, we have different silos of data, we have the players that I showed earlier. How do you see the development of the electronic health record as something that could give a standard for new solutions that, okay, I'm developing a new product, a solution, and there's this electronic health record with standards that are fixed, and I know how to develop my product in order to stick it, to stick it into this, to stick it into this, or make it compatible with the electronic health record. Maybe, yeah.
Okay, so I'm from Australia originally, but I live in Sweden now, and Swedes collect data on absolutely everything. They're very good at it. One thing they do is make you check your car every single year in a car inspection. You drive it in for 5 minutes into a garage, and they measure everything on your car. Okay, if you have a BMW or a Lexus, everything's on your dashboard anyway. You even know the pressure of your tires. Now insurance companies can put a device inside your car to measure the way you move when you drive. Do you drive fast? Do you drive slow? Do you take corners aggressively? All of this data is being exploited by car manufacturers that are creating fantastic technology for cars. That's leading to innovation. The traffic system, Trafikverket, knows more about the way Swedes drive cars in Sweden than any other country on earth because they collect data on it. So from a systematic point of view, it's helping with innovation, how to build roads, where to put bridges, how to design the traffic system. So you do get this information coming from individuals, the way they drive, the way their cars work, to the clinical side, which is how mechanics should fix cars, to industry side, how should we design cars, to systematic levels of how should we design motorways. It's completely possible within healthcare. It's just that there's this political moral dilemma that makes it all cloudy.
Still, it's not happening, and maybe there's also in Germany, for example, and maybe there are some also other facts that we cannot really grasp. It's the culture that we have in sharing and being transparent about data. Professor Dirks, you wanted to?
Yeah.
Because I really want to look at this factor, that the human factor of trusting in who? In players and data?
The products displayed, your inventions and many others, especially in this hall, have one thing in common. They do not fall under the common usual categories. In the old world, we have a pharmaceutical, or we have a medical device, or we have the physician service or the hospital service, and that goes in silos, and the system knows how to deal with that. Now, digital health applications can have a little bit of everything. There are sensors, they collect data from the patient, they motivate the patient to behave differently, so they have something like physiotherapy with them. And with the new version, something else might be added, which might be considered a medical aid, proof that we need to register in a registry of medical devices. And this intersecting development is what I call 4D medicine. It's the alignment of data, drugs, devices, and diagnostics. And this is the real challenge, because any social security system has its pattern for assessing quality and reimbursement of services and products. And if the product or the services are everywhere, then we don't know which rules to apply. Shall it go by pharmaceutical law, medical device law, data protection law, or is everything affected in the intersection? I believe the later. And this is why our government in Germany is currently developing a new law, the second e-health law, which addresses these issues and which will establish a system of assessing and reimbursing digital health applications.
I just wanted to add one more thing. I mean, as we started to work on the standardization process of data coming from a voice interface to electronic health records in US, in America, we observed a totally new trend of different integrations. Like, for sure you're aware of the three big players in US, like Epic, Cerner, and Allscripts, when it comes to the biggest companies offering EHRs and EMRs. And they all started to build their own kind of app stores for digital healthcare apps that a doctor can simply link with their account and transfer the data right from this app or device into the record and chart of a certain patient. And it's something really that facilitated a lot the whole process and also improved the whole movement of interoperability. Another thing is, I'm not aware if the same thing happens right now in Germany, but tell me, I don't know if you already have the FHIR format here, because FHAR, right? The FHIR? Because it's something that changed everything. Like 10 years ago, people were saying like, it originated in the 90s, like FHIR is still not there, but then, Apple created their own EHR with FHIR format, and now every startup is developing a FHIR format for data. So.
Just to answer this question, I think that actually the European Union and the Commission is working on these Europe-based projects regarding electronic e-health records, and they're focusing pretty much on interoperability as well. But yeah, it's not market-driven. It's a bit of bureaucracy, and I think it just takes more time in Europe. But the intentions are there for sure. Transparency, I think it's also there, but it's hard to find, like, for profit-driven players like us.
And I think what you just said, that the discussion on standards and interoperability is a discussion that you can now follow everywhere here in Germany, but here it's a very special topic, because we are also discussing, with this discussion, we're discussing the matter of who's going to pay for it, because we also need to change our whole view on how we reimburse medical treatment, what is medical treatment, and we need to open up and find new ways on that. So for a closing, I would want a closing statement from each one of you. how, because there's an audience sitting here, we have not had the possibility to introduce all of you, but I think you're from different industries, different perspective in the healthcare sector. Maybe you just give a small claim, what you're open to discuss or who you want to talk to, so that there might be some matchmaking afterwards.
Okay, sure. So for sure, I do believe in the power of voice changing the healthcare and being the next big thing, and at the same time, very close integration with the EHR. So what we've been just discussing. So yeah, if you got any ideas on that, how to bring that to Europe or to your own countries or organizations, I'm happy to talk about that afterwards.
Yes, thank you. In our case, we are very much on text-based information, and we are happy to provide that not only directly to patients, but we would be also happy to integrate with gynecologists practices or hospitals focusing on reproductive health. So if any of you is a practitioner, I'm really happy to discuss integrations of Super Easy AI with you.
Quinematic and AI Move are just across the road there, so if anybody's brave enough to do their own scan and wants some insights, computer-assisted insights in how you move and what potential problems you have now or in the future, you're most welcome to come and see us. I'd just like to finish by saying, see the opportunity in computer-assisted assessment and computer-assisted decision-making. Try not to be threatened by it. We're allowed to make mistakes along the way. That's the nature of technology.
I offer to you that we can use the situation for a bilateral communication of how to foster innovation in life science and healthcare, because it's our destiny to support companies that come up with brilliant ideas, to take them onto the market and to make the time until market access shorter, so that the patients will improve and we can mutually contribute to improve lives.
Thank you so much.